The Burning of Athulu by Chris Mendham and Kylee Conrad. Read by Steve Parker. The great tree Athulu burned, the flames visible across the land. To avoid the searing heat, Martok landed some distance away on a promontory rock, high up overlooking the Lake of the Lost. Flapping his wings, Martok chose to remain resolute and alert, ready to take to the sky at the first sign of danger. Even this distance from the atrocity invited death. Nowhere is safe in the verdant lands, thought Martok. The scent of lavender reached him. Not so odd this high up when you knew to whom the aroma belonged. "Where were you, Tithia al-Sira?" said Martok without looking down. "Seeing the devastation for myself and escorting the Blessing Maker to higher ground. He wouldn't go without his crystals, as you may imagine," answered Martok. "The young ones are with Althea and the elders in Rathdun." Martok cut his sister off, never breaking focus. "Go see if our friends in the north are still set to be here by nightfall." "I should stay here with you." "I'm safe behind the black smoke. They can't charge if they can't see the ground at their feet or breathe as they trespass." Martok interrupted his sister again. The scent of lavender left the mountainside, and Martok sighed. The departure of his sister always tore at his soul. He could still sense her, and would for many leagues, but the journey north would take her beyond his hidden sight. A great booming noise from the valley of Audible shook the rocks beneath Martok's claws. Looking again towards that which stabbed the heart, he witnessed only destruction and the accent of darkness. Then he saw it, oozing out from the shadow of the Hearth Mountain that encircled the valley of Athulu. The earth shook again. The fierce leader was overcome with regret for sending Martok away, but the instinct to protect her rapidly replaced his brief moment of weakness. Knowing she would have also sensed his distress to a certain distance, as most Twain-born do. But now he desperately hoped she was beyond psychism, as all illogical terror took him. A dark, faceless, fluid-like mass, no, swarm of all things pestilent, seeking refuge from the flames well within the strata, had been expelled all at once. The drone of the collective rumbled deep as it swam through the flak-filled valley. The landscape trembled again, followed by a percussive thunderclap that far exceeded the first. Martok felt a tightness in his breast as the sound caught up to his location. He knew of no instrumentation nor machine of war capable of such a tone of depth and frequency. Across the valley, at the ridge of the hearth, several trails could be seen cresting over and making their way down into the valley, like skeletal fingers clutching at the mountainside. An army of those putrid cohorts, the verminous, no doubt, thought Martok. The ground began to quake once more. Martok braced himself for the boom. As the shockwave hit him, a doubt settled into his mind. He tried to shake it loose, but it would just not budge. The verminous were behind the attack on the great tree of Authulu, yes, however, it was a strange move to commit so much of their forces to a battle they could not win. Any attack on the tree was suicide. The verminous would know this. The shadow mages would relish the sacrifice of so many. It would feed their dark souls. And yet, to empty their lands to feed that darkness was lunacy beyond his madness. The verdant lands possessed a sitting army of over 3 million. Cassian centaurs from the east, Devati and Shanuate elves from the forest lands of Gaeansphoria, Martok's people, the mighty hawk squadrons from the mountains of Ash in the west. The beasts from the central plains, Althea and her gorilla people, regaining their strength at Rathdun, and from the north, the bulk of their forces, the hordes of the ice people. Martok reached a decision. He would fly to the mountains of Ash and muster his people. Once roused, they would join with the ice people and his sister. Then they would pour down on the verminous corruption and crush it, driving it back into the abyss. Instinctively, he sent out a message to his sister. He didn't know if she'd receive it, but he hoped the emotion would travel that bit further, and that she'd sense it, at least. Murloc was about to set off when an itch scratched at the corner of his mind. The itch became stronger. The details were foggy, and then he smelt it. Lavender. Looking north, then east, and finally down into the valley, his heart skipped a beat. Tithia Al-Sira, unguarded, streaked low to the ground, heading straight towards the darkness. And, unconscious in her talons, she carried the Blessing Maker. Murloc reeled. He leapt off the promontory and dove straight towards his sister, screaming. Martok was undeterred by the shattering pitch of her brother's screams. The filthy rattlings below were not unaffected by the powerful cry, with all those in Murloc's path dropping to the dirt, clutching their ears and writhing in pain. This, in turn, seemed to cause the ground to swell and amplify the encroaching shadows. As Murloc closed the distance, his screeches became a desperate plea. "Martok! Sky Guardian Tithia Al-Sira! Mother of Ash Mountain, Keeper of Athulu!" The valley began to shake yet again, and Murloc cried out, "Era Cassia, I command you to stop!" With this, she would, and the pair found themselves circling above the Lake of the Lost. He looked at the poor, battered Blessing Maker in her grasp. It was not clear if he was dead or alive. "Sister, does he still breathe?" he asked. "Only just," she replied. "What has brought you to this? On the verge of a war in the Verdant Lands?" he asked in a whirlwind of confusion. Martok then held up her captive, opened her nib, and let out a high-pitched shriek that echoed through the valley. The Blessing Maker groaned and coughed. "Show him!" she ordered. He laboriously removed a small stone from his sleeve and held it in his open, trembling palm. A mirror-black obsidian teardrop with the mark of the mage that could only mean one thing: dark magic. The lake, at this moment, began to churn, roll, and boil. The shadows grew ever wider, and Murloc's heart broke in two. "You burned Athulu!" he screamed, ready to rip the betrayer to shreds with his own talons. "Brother, no!" She paused to allow her own heart to ruin. "He has put a hex on us, corrupted our connection. It wasn't the verminous quaking the land, it was us." How do we reverse? There must be some... The elves! I will go to Gantz... Murloc began, frantic and disjointed. "No, Murloc," his sister interrupted him now. "Guardian of the Sky Grave, Dorian, Master of Ash Mountain, Keeper of Athulu, my brother, you must be who you are now and always. It's too late to undo what evil has been set in motion. The Verdant Lands is your path now. I must reset the frequency. That is my path now." Murloc was helpless. The ground began to ebb as they shared the same mind's eye. "Martok, no!" he cried out as she dove sharply downward into the blackened, churning water with the Blessing Maker in tow. Instantly, the ground settled. He couldn't feel her anymore. No hints of lavender. He perched on a dry, burnt branch. There was a horn blowing in the distance. It was the Icemen.